It was 1958. We were staying at Kenny Fields' place in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. It was me and Frenchie and Dick Meehan, I guess. At any rate, Bobby Cuco and RJ and Joe was coming out. They had an old Dodge, four-door, well, a 49 Dodge. Bobby fell asleep at night driving semi, just creased the whole right side of the car. The driver said, I tried hard to miss you, but I just couldn't. At any rate, they got with us in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. And Kenny said, well, you need work? And we said, yeah, bad. He said, well, why don't you go to Crossbell? They're always hiring. So the Crossbell was a big ranch, went from Kansas into Oklahoma. We went and met with the foreman, big burly guy with danger written on his knuckles. And I said, we're needing to start some colts. He said, well, I don't need any colt starters. But he said, I'll feed you guys anyway. The Crossbell table was about 20 feet long, and they fed all day long. It was a big ranch, and it had a brand down the middle of the Crossbell. So that didn't work. Kenny said there's a guy named, what's his name? It's bad. There's a guy needs some calves branded, Ben Patterson. He's in Natchez, Kansas, just across the line. So we went and seen Ben. He said, yeah, we got about 46 calves. He said, I got to go to a roping. He had a red and white 55 Oldsmobile with a one-horse trailer. He was a roper. So we started marking them calves. Naturally, we didn't know what we were doing. We blotched the brands. So I'm sure that screw worms were getting under it and they had to redo them. But he paid RJ. He said, I'll pay you for leaving. He gave money to RJ. So just as we were finishing up, I seen that car leaving. I said, Frenchie, where's he going? He said, he's going to go get supplies. What supplies? We're done. Day went into night. There was a stagnant water hole, and that's all there was. We froze our ass off. That next day, we were way out in the Buzzle country. Nobody ever knew we were there. Nobody, we were going to die. And here come a little dust deal. It was the King, Jerry King and his brother, and some old hide they were breathing heavy over. So he said, Barrett, Wade's got your boys in jail in Caney. I says, what do you mean? He says, well, they raised hell in Caney and Wade locked them up. Take me to him. Frenchie was hanging on my leg. He said, take me to him. I said, come on, I'll get the car and come get you guys. You'll see. So they took me in and I seen Wade, big guy, had a hog leg down to his knee. I mean, a long sucker. And I said, Wade, he says, yeah, if you give me any trouble, you're going to jail with the rest of them. I said, Wade, there was a car. He said, yeah, and he threw me the keys. It was a different time. So I got the car and went and got Frenchie and Bobby. And so we went to the Caney Cafe. The front window was knocked out. They'd raised hell with Caney. And we ordered a bowl of chili. It was 50 cents and all the crackers you could eat. So we were eating our bowl of chili, and they brought the prisoners in, a guard with a shotgun. They sit down, RJ asked for a menu and started ordering a steak. He said, I want a steak an inch thick and I want this. Frenchie jumped off the counter and dove over and started choking him. The deputy was beating Frenchie off with the butt of the shotgun. At any rate, I went back and I seen him, and I said, "Are you guys not? What did you do? How can you be that stupid, Barrett?" I can explain I said, "You can always explain everything." He said, "It's a trumped up charge." I said, "I'm sure it is." Well, what happened? They took the money that Ben Patterson gave them, went into the Caney Cafe and ordered orange juice, but first stopped at the ABC store and got 2 bottles of vodka. And they made screwdrivers. And they drank the whole 2/5 of vodka, the 3 of them, in orange juice. And then went nuts, beating up people, and it was terrible. Wade got 2 of them and locked them up. Joe and Dick Meehan. So RJ heard they were locked up, and he went to Wade and he said, "Wade, I understand you got some friends of mine locked up." He says, "Yeah, and if you give me any trouble, I'll lock you up too." "Well, you let them loose." Wade pulled out that big hard leg, stuck it under RJ's chin, and said, "How tall are you?" RJ said, 5'10". He said, "Get in that goddamn cell." So now 3 of them are in there because they're stupid. But at any rate, so we tried everything. You know, we waited until they arraigned him, and they arraigned him that next morning. So we were in the courtroom, and we got there early, and there was a guy with bib overalls, a painter, and he was painting the walls. I said, "Is this where they're going to have those desperados?" He says, "Yep." I said, "When's the judge going to get here?" He says, "He's here now." I said, "He is?" He says, "Yeah, I'm the judge." I said, "But look at the way you lay that paint. You're an artist." He said, "Where are you from in Queens?" I said, "Astoria." He said, "You know where the Hellgate Bridge is?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Me and 7 Indians painted the Hellgate Bridge. We lost 2 Indians, but we painted it." I said, "They say there's pirate ships and stuff way deep in that water under the Hellgate." "Well, there could be. I don't know." I said, "Your Honor, boys will be, don't give me that boys will be boys shit." He says, "If they just plead guilty and I'll go as easy as I can on them, whatever that is." I said, "Okay." So I got with him. I said, "Okay, when you stand in front of that judge and he says, 'How do you plead?' you say guilty." So he came in and said, "Okay." He said 7 counts of drunken disorder, using profound language, to Joe. Joe looked at me. I said, "What, Joe?" He said, "You know I never curse." I said, "That's true, but just this one time, just say guilty." "Okay, but I don't like it." So Joe said guilty. Then Dick Meehan stood up, 7 counts, drunkenness, guilty. RJ looked over at me and said, so he said, 7 counts, drunkenness, how do you plead? Guilty, $27, 27 days. Okay, so they all got the same deal. I just had to figure out how to get that money, and my mother didn't have a telephone, and their mothers were dead, and just their fathers were dead. Nobody had anything. You couldn't send back for nothing. So RJ says, "Listen, Paul, there's a convenience store in Dewey, Oklahoma. And the guy that owns its daughter was a dancer on the George Gobel show. I spent one night with her. She'll spring us. If you say so, you'll see." So we drove down to the convenience store. We're out of everything. So we asked where so-and-so was. I forget her name now. So she comes out, and she was a cute little thing. I said, "R.J. Christie said that you spring him. He's in the Caney jail." I said, "But we don't have any gas or cigarettes or sandwiches." She says, "Wait." So she made us sandwiches, gave us Lucky Strikes, and said, "Take me to him." So I put her in the car, and I took her down to the jail. And she pulled up a chair, put her feet up on the bars and said, "Okay, RJ, when am I getting my rings and when are we getting married?" He said, "As soon as I get out of here. You spring us and I'll be out. We're going to get married, I promise you. You know, that's going to happen." She says, "I'm not springing them, but I'll spring you." He said, "Okay." RJ said, "Barrett, you can spring us. You can find a way to spring us. Who gives? Where's Dewey? Where's fucking Dewey, Oklahoma? Nobody cares about it." I seen there was a chain in the corner of it was one fire truck, and at the back of the fire truck was one door that went to the jail, one cell jail. So I went back that night, and I took that chain, and I hooked it around the axle of the truck and around the door to the cell. On the outskirts of town was an old barn with 5-year-old, 10-year-old hay in it. It said "Chew Red Man" on the side. I lit it up, and it was bright because it was a dark night. I went back and I heard ding, 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 and I waited around the corner, and I waited, and I waited, and nothing happened. Well, the fire truck took off and bowed the door, but not enough so they could get out of it. They couldn't hardly get their head out of the thing. The fat's in the fire now. I showed up next day. He said, "Don't say a word." Not a word. I said, "Wade," he said, "Don't even say, wait, don't say nothing. I know what you did." He says, "You owe me $26 for a new door. I kind of like you, and that's what's going to happen. You're going to give me $26 for a new jail door." At any rate, I don't know how I got it, but I got it. And we got them two out of jail. And we went down to Bartlesville. And we stayed in a cheap motel. 2 beds, 3 of us in each bed. And you walk down the hallway to a bathroom. Wade said if he ever sees any of us again in Caney, Kansas, he'll kill us on the street, wherever. So I woke up and I looked around. I said, "Where's RJ and Dick, Mean, and Joe?" He said, "They left early this morning." I left for where? Where could they leave for? He said he's going to see his Uncle Ray Ray in Tulsa. What Uncle Ray Ray? I was livid again, waiting. Finally, around 2 o'clock, here comes that car. I said, "Where have you guys been?" He said, "Remember I told you about my Uncle Ray?" "RJ, don't do that bullshit. There ain't no Uncle Ray Ray. You never told me about no Uncle Ray." He's in Tulsa. That's where we went, and we got some libation. He says, "Yeah, and the bag's in the back." I said, "RJ, you're a lot dumber than you appear to be. There's Kansas State stickers on this whiskey. It came from Caney. You had the balls to go back there and buy this? Are you fucking nuts?" I said, "First of all, get out of the car, all 3 is, and start hitchhiking, because I'm fucking finished with you." He said, "Okay." So they got out, and in those days, they had U-drivers. You drive somebody's car across the country and they pay you half down and then half when you get there. And so they got a nice cream-colored convertible. I think it was a Mercury. At any rate, they'd already seen New York. And so they said, "You know, we know what New York looks like, but we don't know what California looks like." So they headed for California, and I guess they went to smoking cigars and drinking whiskey, and took 30-foot of chain of barbed wire fence down, tore the car up, deposited in California. They had a light and load. So what they did was they said, okay, Dick, we're going to have to drop you off because we got a light and low, but we'll come get you as soon as I come up with something. So they dropped him off at the bus terminal in Los Angeles. Just get out of the car, that's it. RJ found a woman back then in '58 with blue hair. She was a waitress. She didn't have nothing but good credit, and that was good enough. RJ had to buy him a new wardrobe. She didn't have anything. And a 1958 Sierra Gold Chevy convertible. And and I guess they went back to get Dick Meehan. Dick said, boys, how you doing? They said, well, we're doing good. He was in the same spot they left him. He said, let me buy you breakfast. He said, buy us breakfast? Yes. He had pockets full of change. So they went and had breakfast, and he said, the little money I had, I invested in cotton and made a killing. RJ said, in cotton, invested it in cotton? Yes. He said, you see, this is the large economy block of cotton. Now, when that bus comes in, everybody's going to run to the telephones and make long-distance calls. Except I'm going to wedge this cotton up so when the money comes back or it don't come back or whatever, it gets stuck on top of that cotton. And after they leave, then I go pull the cotton out and collect my my change. I can't believe it. He said, yeah, you got to think when you're up against it. At any rate, they got in a car wreck in some canyon and rolled the car over. And RJ and the blue-headed girl and I guess Joe was in the front. And the cops came with flashlights and it was night. And RJ says, quick, give me a flashlight. He says, okay, what can you? He says, no, I lost a bunch of change and it's here someplace. So the cop said, yeah, all right. At any rate, and he tried to judge the Miss Universe contest at Long Beach. I think he sat down for one person and they gave him the hook. But there was something else that's been too long ago, I guess. But if I think about it, I'll put it on.